Díomh agus fáilte arás. You're all very welcome to another episode of Irish in Toronto. Today I'll be speaking with Donal O'Riordan. Originally from Malahide in North County Dublin, Donal has been living in Toronto for the past 18 years after having spent 4 years outside of Ireland before then. This is a fascinating and intriguing conversation with a person who has got me thinking about a lot of things since our chat. We are both well able to talk, and as a result, this episode is a slightly longer one than usual, but well worth a listen. We discuss everything from arriving in Toronto with a 6-month-old baby to sports gambling and porn-induced impotency. Donal is a captivating character, but he is also an extremely honest one. He takes time to discuss his reasons for giving up alcohol in his mid-20s and pulls no punches regarding his relationship with both Canada and Ireland throughout his life. I would still encourage people to download the episodes and to share them with friends and family. Downloads are the easiest indicator for me to gauge how many people I'm reaching with these conversations, so I would really appreciate it. I began our chat by asking Donal about when he first came to Toronto.
I came to Canada in 2008. I left Ireland in 2004. And I was thinking, it was funny thinking about this podcast. It was like an examination of conscience. Yeah. Do you remember when you were a kid, you go to confession, you'd be like, okay, right, I better get a couple of good ones. I better have a couple of good ones in there. Yeah, wouldn't we waste the man's day? Wouldn't we want to waste the man's time? Apparently, it used to drive my dad crazy when his dad would have gone to the doctor and come back, and my dad said, well, did you tell him about the cough? Did you tell him about your cough? He says, no, sure, I wouldn't want to be worrying the man. I wouldn't want to be worrying. Whereas I was more like kind of an examination of conscience, like, right, what stories? Like, let's find some good ones. And it was terrible, actually. I was, Sorry to put that on. Do you know what I mean? Like, I was like, geez, I better have a good one. And then I kind of let go of that and decided we'd show up and chat. And you're very hard to talk to.
Yeah, difficult.
You're not amiable or affable at all. And so I came in 2008. My daughter, who turns 18 at the start of February, was 6 months old. And I was with my then wife, who was from Montreal. And we had met. We'd met in the US, but we'd married in London. We were both living in London. And I'm mindful when we're on a podcast that might be heard by Canadian, London, UK.
Yeah, London, England.
Yeah, London, England. I lived in London for 4 years, and I remember when I first came here talking, I was getting tickets to the opera, and I was in line, and I was talking to this older woman in front of me, and I was talking about the opera scene in London. And she was looking at me, and she said, I didn't even know London had an opera house. I was like, yeah, no, it's got 3. She said, no, in London. I said, yeah. And a lot of people go, yeah, it's packed. She was talking about London, and it hadn't occurred to her.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So it came in 2008, and was married in 2006, and we had a 6-month-old. And I came on a landed immigrant visa, and had gone through the process of getting that, and which included going to Harley Street in London to get a full physical, including being checked for TB.
Yeah.
And that was very evocative. It's like, I remember saying to the doctor, you're going to check me for leprosy too. Like, being checked for TB.
Yeah, in this day and age.
Yes.
When I went to the US for a year, I definitely had to produce evidence that I didn't have TB.
Right.
In 2016. Yeah.
I remember I went with Troker to Rwanda, to East Africa in the 90s, and you had to get an immunization passport for all of the we were going to Tanzania, we were going to Rwanda and Kenya and Uganda, and you had to get a pass, and they wanted one for, I think, diphtheria. I can't remember which one it was, for which there is no inoculation. There's one for which there was no inoculation. So what the Irish authorities do is they stamp on your passport near hugging. He didn't get it, right? But the border officials in East Africa aren't usually fluent in the Irish language, so they just see a stamp. So you're good to go. I was wondering if they could do that. I was at Harley Street. So we came, I was a teacher in the UK, and we came during the summer, July 2008, and I left Ireland 2004. And I would calculate that between 2004 and today, I've probably been back to Ireland for a total of less than 3 months.
Interesting.
Yeah, I've been sparing. And so I'm mindful that if I talk about Ireland, I want to be careful that it's, that my experience of Ireland, my full-time experience stops in 2004, and I knew I was losing touch with it when I didn't recognise ministers' names in the newspaper. The Minister of Education, who the hell is that? Whereas I would have been able to, rattle off at least so we came in 2008 from London, and I remember there was a terrible thunderstorm. We had to land in Ottawa and take off again, and the Air Canada flight attendant took my daughter's special seat in Ottawa, and we were supposed to hold her, and I got into a row with him. Foreshadowing my time in Canada, I got into a row with him on the plane. Like, he says, we have to take it for safety. I said, what do you mean? We're still taking off. We're still... and I remember you have to go through secondary and in Pearson Airport when you arrive, and there was a border agent opening the suitcase of a woman, and he was taking out wads and wads of artificial dollar notes, wads and wads of them. And this looked like she was involved in forgery or something, but really it was one of those cultural practices. There are certain cultures where you burn, paper money or artificial money as a symbolic offering, And so she was trying to explain this to him. I remember watching it going, oh shit, man. I'm getting it easy. Yeah. So we came to Canada in 2008, and my daughter was 6 months old. I remember her jumping in the stroller as we were going through the airport. She was off the plane. She was free,
Why Toronto if your wife was from Montreal at the time?
Because my French is nearly as bad as my Irish, or the other way around. And I love Montreal, and it's the city in North America that reminds me most of Dublin.
Yeah, I'd agree.
You know what I mean? Yeah, it has a little edge.
Yeah.
It has a little edge to it. And it's interesting. Since coming to Canada, I've done work in Montreal, and I've done work in Quebec. And one of the differences I've noticed in at lunchtime, if I do work in Ontario, everyone spreads. They all go and get their individual something to eat, and then they come back. I'm a bit of a fascist when I'm doing workshops, by the way. There's no food in the workshops. I'm like very, very, I gave a workshop a while ago, and this guy comes back after lunch with 2 Big Macs. I said, what are you doing? Get outside that door now. Yeah. In Quebec, when it was lunchtime, I was doing a lot of work for Bell. I was doing workshops in Montreal for Bell, and when it's lunchtime, the lunch comes in, and they all sit around the table and they eat together. And I thought, wow, to see such difference within the country,
individualism versus
collectivism or communal, So not Montreal, because my French wasn't good enough. There was, I suppose, a feeling that there was more opportunity here, English speaking, and it felt like my wife at the time had been out of Canada 16 years, and she was ready to come home. But to her mind, I think Montreal was just a short jump away. Yeah. So to Toronto we came.
Yeah. In Toronto you stayed.
And in Toronto we stayed. Yeah, exactly. I think that if I'm going to live in Canada, I think if I was going to live in the US, there's probably about 4 places in the US I'd live. And if I was going to live in Canada, there's, even fewer.
Does that go back to having grown up in the capital city in Ireland, that you're used to living in kind of an urban environment, or is there another reason? I know you're not from inner city Dublin.
No. The feeling of I used to say when I lived in the States that United States is 3,000 miles long but about an inch deep. You know what I mean? It's like the history is recent in use. Well, the official history. Whereas in Ireland, you cannot drive 6 miles without ploughing through history, you know. I can't remember, I think it's Jude the Obscure. There's a line from Thomas Hardy's Jude the Obscure where one of the characters, they move into a house and she says she can't move in the house because of the weight of the previous owners on her.
Wow. Yeah.
And I think that shows up in Ireland, you know. With Canada, the reason for staying in Toronto, I think, was, an urban environment, and also, you know, I wanted to get a business going. I wanted to kind of, and this is where the opportunity was. So I'm much more fond of and much more alive to rural Canada now than I was when I first came. You know, I remember when we first came, we went up to Muskoka. Oh my God, which Irish people, it's called cottage country here. And it was just, I kind of felt very Stepford, you know, Stepford Wives type deal. It was, you know, it was like, what is this? You know, this cottage. And you can date Canadians by whether they have a cottage or not.
100%.
Do you know what I mean? The cottage is a legacy inheritance. And it's a cultural thing, and you have to know how to do the cottage. If you're invited up to the cottage, that's a big deal, and you have to know how to behave. You know, like we think in Ireland cottage, we think thatched, white, painted thing. No, the cottage is a second home, and there are rules. And I suppose I've warmed to rural Canada since in recent years. I think I found it a tough go early on. I found it quite samey. So Toronto made a lot of sense.
Yeah, fair enough.
And you know, I suppose the opportunity here.
I didn't intend on asking this, but 2004, Ireland's doing quite well. I know it's very generic, but for you to leave in 2004 and go to London, do you want to talk about why you left then?
Absolutely not. Stop it right now. I felt like I had worn out the place, or I was ready. I was ready for what was next. I worked on a PhD, and the very fact that I'm saying I worked on it should be a giveaway. I worked on a PhD. I was at Trinity and I was doing a PhD in theology. And I started on it in 96, 97. I was in Georgetown for a year doing graduate classes. And I came back in 97. And I started working on it. And it broke my heart. And you and I had a conversation prior to this about doing a PhD or not doing a PhD. And I would say it broke my heart, and I would say that I allowed myself to be kind of... I didn't play it as well as I wanted. I didn't get on well at all with my supervisor. And we clashed, and I found it hard going. It's funny, you were asking me about why I came, or leaving Ireland in 2004. I felt I had exhausted it. I felt that I needed something new and I needed something different, and I had been in a PhD that I kind of got stuck in it. And I started on the PhD really in 96, and I submitted it in 2002 and then again in 2004, and was told in 2004 it was a no-go. And I just... by that time I had done the HDIP. I had already kind of had the smarts to kind of, or enough awareness of the situation. I had a backup plan. I'd done a HDIP at UCD in 2003, 2004. And I moved to London in 2004, and I remember buying a one-way ticket. I didn't buy a return flight. I remember kind of, like a John Denver song. Yeah. You know, I was like, I'm done here. You know, or I'm done here for now. And there was the economic stuff, but I was also, you know, I grew up in Ireland in the 80s and 90s, and just the political stuff I found. I think that's one of the differences with Canada, is that there was a kind of authorised corruption in Ireland in the 80s and even the 90s. And regardless of where you stand on the political spectrum, I grew up in North County Dublin, and if you go from the city centre to Malahide, you pass through Concealy, which is where Charlie Haughey had his house. And it was pointed out to me once that all of the road signs, not the road signs, all of the street lights before his house are on one side of the road and after his house on the other side of the road, because Charlie Haughey didn't want to be driving under the street lamps. Isn't that nuts? Like if you go to where, I can't remember the name of, Abbey, is it Abbeyfield, Abbeylex, Abbey something or other in Concealy, that the street lights switch sides right after the entrance to his house.
Incredible.
Yeah, that's like,
just one example of
yes,
authorised corruption.
Yeah, exactly. So, but I was done. I kind of I felt that I needed a fresh start, a new start. I'd stopped drinking in 2000. I stopped drinking in 2000 and got sober in Ireland, and then moved to the UK. It was definitely a feeling of a fresh start. I was 30. I was born 73. I moved 2004. I just turned 30. And I was, I'm 52 now. So I realise now I've been out of Ireland the majority of my adult life.
Yeah. Yeah, that is that realisation when it dawns on people.
Yeah. Yeah, and so that's a funny one because I what brought you to Toronto? Why might I stay and all the rest of it. And one of the funny things, there's an amazing documentary called Some Kind of Monster. A documentary crew went into to film Metallica recording an album, 2003. Now, I love orchestral music and I love opera and all this, but I love metal.
Yeah.
And this documentary crew went in, and they went in with perfect timing because the band was fragmenting. One of them went into treatment, and there's a scene where they audition a new bass player. I'm going somewhere with this.
Yeah, no.
I'm
listening.
It's an amazing scene. They try to audition a new bass player. And one of them says, so the first bass player in Metallica died, and then the second one quit. And one of them says that if Cliff Burton, the original bass player, if he came in to audition now, he probably wouldn't get the job. That they have moved on.
Yeah.
And that what they needed then and what they need now has changed. And there are things that I need that I don't get from Canada. There are certain things that I need that I don't get, and I feel the need to be nurtured in them elsewhere. I really miss irreverence. Canada can be a very solemn place, a very straight place, a very serious place, and Ireland is, I think, the global capital of irreverence. Do you know what I mean? Like if somebody asks me tells me what I need to do, what I have to do, my first question in my gut is, who are you? Like, who told you? Air travel's a problem for me.
I struggle myself.
Do you know what I mean?
Myself,
but
yeah.
I have to stand where, and I can't do what, and you can't. There's a sign up in Newark. There's a sign up, no joking about bombs. No, the part of me just goes, oh God,
press the button.
Yeah, time. So the sense that what I need, Ireland mightn't provide anymore. That I got what I needed at the time, but I have, I'm kind of a hybrid now, and there are things I need that maybe Ireland couldn't supply and couldn't provide. At the same time, I think the one thing I miss most is eye rolling. I miss eye rolling. I think that when you roll your eyes, like when you roll, like if I do it, I know it's on a podcast, but you do this with your eyes, you're kind of invoking an invisible chorus, like in Greek theatre, an invisible chorus who would agree with you. Where you look at somebody doing, acting the Aegis or being a gobshite, and you go, oh, look at your man. Yeah. Who are you saying that to? I have found in Canada when I go there, if something's a bit too serious, they're like, oh, give me a break, will you? There's a kind of a stiffness, or it's been my experience that if I disagree with something, or if I question something, certainly when I first came here, so I'm thinking 2008, 2009, coming from Ireland, I think proportional representation is just the best political electoral system in the world. It's just tremendous entertainment. Proportional representation to me is just great theatre.
Yeah.
And I have a brother who was elected to the Dáil, and he got in, I think, on the 9th count and the 11th count. Sure, it was great.
Yeah.
She'd be watching transfers from this box going there, and who, like...
The unpredictable nature.
Yes! Yeah, the 7th candidate got eliminated. Oh, Jesus, what's going to happen? Here it's first past the post. It's about as exciting as a bath.
Yeah. I remember talking to my family about it the first time I voted as a citizen, and we had the results, that night.
Yeah, sure, what?
My mother, they couldn't comprehend.
Yes.
How do you have it? It was like, is that because of the technology? I said, no, it's over. Once
It's
you
over.
know, Yeah.
Yeah. And so, but I remember extolling the virtues of proportional representation to Canadians and saying, the first past the post system, I don't know, it's kind of legacy of the British. Whereas in fact, proportional representation was introduced in Ireland by the British, but we won't go there. But what I found was that if I disagreed with something initially when I first came, 2008, 2009 into 2010, it would be re-explained to me more slowly. The feeling was I just hadn't grasped it.
Yeah.
And I found that maddening, infuriating. I had a job interview very early on. Did I tell you that? I don't know if I told you this when we were. Very early on, I had a job interview at Centennial College. And...
in East York?
Yes.
Yeah.
And a teaching job. And the person in front of me had my resume in front of her. And she said, just to let you know, you misspelled your first name.
Oh, that would drive me insane.
Oh, it was...
How do you answer that?
Oh, I said, let me get this straight. I can remember exactly what I said. I said, just to clarify, you think I can't spell my first name correctly, but you've still called me for an interview?
Yeah.
How low are your standards?
I've been told I mispronounce my own
Yeah,
name.
yeah.
Which is
Not incredible.
Yeah.
It's an incredible, but it's an incredibly... I don't know how to describe it, patronising but just so you know, just to clarify, just to let you know going forward. And I've also found, particularly early on, the pronunciation of my name. Canadians struggle with the pronunciation of my name. And for a while I let it go, and I've stopped letting it go now.
Interesting. Usually it's the other way around. People get sick of pushing back on it so much that they just accept it, but you actually went the other way.
I have, and what it means is that I now commit in the first couple of minutes of meeting a Canadian, if I think they're a keeper, if I'm going to have more dealings with them, it is, they'll go, I'll say it's doe, as in doe, a deer, and null, as in null and void. Doe, null. And they will always say, oh, Donal. Nearly.
Yeah.
Nearly. So I found that my relationship to my name has changed. That at the start I was, you call me Donal, that's fine. Do I get the job? You want to call me Donal, that's cool. I'm trying to get the business going, get money coming in. It's fine, Donal, that's okay, whatever. And now I'm more, actually it's Donal.
Yeah. You're more sure of yourself.
Yeah.
In a way as well.
Less apologetic, I think. Yeah, more sure of myself. But also, what I said about Ireland and why I left in 2004, that I'd kind of gotten from it what I needed to get at the time. I feel that way about Canada now. I've been here nearly 18 years and I've gotten from it. I feel what I needed to get or what I came for. And my children are of an age, and I'm kind of looking at Act 3. And I don't know why I would be talking to my son about this, but I said, God, there's no way I want to be buried here.
Interesting.
Yeah, the thought of it being buried, I mean, who cares?
I know, yeah, I know. I often thought it's such a self-absorbed thing to worry about something like that.
Yeah.
And people take it very seriously.
Yes, yeah. And I would, I had this feeling of, there's from Malahide and there's a beach, and I said to my son, I'd love to be, scatter my ashes there. And he's as much said, I will, yeah. He kind of said, I will, sure, no problem. wouldn't be much follow up on that one. How could you confirm either way? But those are definitely some of the early things. We were talking about one of the first impressions I had of Canada when I came here, and it was like the first couple of weeks, and I was in downtown. I've always lived in downtown Toronto, and a streetcar went by, and there's a sign at the back of the streetcar. I don't know if it's still there. I think it is, but it says "Stay 9 meters back. It's the law." I remember thinking that's tremendous, because that is a motivator, or that's a clarifier here. It's the law.
Yeah.
If you were to say to somebody in Ireland, and I don't want to be, stereotyped or, everyone's anarchic, but if you were to try to emphasise somebody saying it's the law, I'm not sure it would have the same impact.
No impact.
Right?
Yeah, it would almost be a piss take.
Yeah, it's the law.
I always give the example, and I describe Canadians as being law-abiding, and in a way I have grown to enjoy certain parts of it. And the example I always give is obviously the crossing the road thing, the fact that there is almost... You do, of course, you see people crossing the road, so the kind of thing is that people are actually crossing the road at pedestrian crossings when they're supposed to, when the light says go. And the odd time you see people crossing the road not like that, but it's almost always an immigrant doing that.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
And isn't it funny when you said the word immigrants, and part of me just tightened? Yeah. Because often when we use that word, it's
the actual definition.
I'm an immigrant.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, you're an immigrant. Absolutely, it is, and it's. I find they're law-abiding, and I found that the other one that I found very funny, and of course everyone who's ever watched a movie from the States, and is the. When the main way of people getting their news was print media, the newspaper dispensers on the corner where you put in a quarter, or as they would say here, a loonie or a toonie, and you open it up and you take one newspaper and you close it again. Like, how long did that last in Ireland? Like, you just...
At Dublin Airport, there's, you probably notice this when you go there, they have huge amounts of these,
water bottles.
Yeah. And I think it was €1. It might be €2 now.
Yeah.
But, essentially you put it in a dispenser they have, but the bottles are there to be taken.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's many non-Irish citizens flying through Dublin Airport who pay.
Yeah.
I don't imagine there's many Irish people.
Last time I went, I certainly didn't pay. I remember. It's like, this is an honour system. I'm dishonourable. I suppose.
You see it in subway systems all over the world, in North America. Yeah, then the opposite is true in North America. A lot of subway systems, it's basically impossible to get on without paying unless you're willing to hop the gate. Whereas in Europe, it's actually the opposite. It's a bit more trustworthy. You have to go to your way to validate your ticket.
Yes.
I got caught in Budapest once, and I'll be honest, I still to this day don't really know what I did wrong. I had a ticket, but it wasn't validated. That really annoyed me. That I actually paid. Paid.
Yes, yeah.
But anyway,
well, the streetcars that way here, you can hop on and hop off. There is an honour system here.
Yeah.
Where I struggle, and I think I experienced this very early on when I came, but I've never really shaken it. Is there's a kind of a Boy Scout nearly solemnity thing where, so for example, you go to Tim Hortons. And you go to pay, and the person says, "Oh, the person in front of you has paid for you."
Yeah.
I'm like, that brings up a whole lot. You kind of feel morally groped.
Do you feel obliged to buy something for the next person?
I do, yes. I just feel it feels. I don't like it. It feels smug. But I don't like it in the same way that I remember one of my first times in a restaurant in the States. Person I was with saying that they had coupons for a discount, and I was mortified.
Okay. Something going on in your childhood there.
Yes, definitely. Definitely. Like, are you saying we don't have enough money to pay for this food, sort of thing? Yeah. But I definitely think that there is... I would describe the difference between Canadians and Americans is that Americans are obedient. In the sense, once the flag goes up and the anthem goes, or we get behind the president when there's a war, some aggression. They're obedient. I find Canadians are compliant.
Interesting. Yeah.
They will comply, but they kind of want you to know that they have chosen to do so. And I go to a lot of sports events. I go and I have noticed something that happens is that if you're sitting in your seat and somebody is coming to sit down, they may stand and wait for you to notice them. And I play chicken with them now. I'll just say lock on, wait for them to say something. They might stand, they may not say, excuse me, they don't wait for you to notice them. And then you look up at them and then you're supposed to say, oh, sorry. And then there's a little dance where they say no problem, and da-da-da-da. And that's an interesting thing to me. It feels very trivial. It feels like, what are you talking about, like sports things? But I've noticed the crossing the road, there's a politeness. They will stand and wait. There's a compliance in crossing the road. There's a politeness when you're sitting at the sports events. They will come and stand beside you, but not actually say anything, And then finally, if I stare forward, and after a few seconds they'll crack and they'll go, excuse me, But
that must be tough for you working in conflict resolution.
I mean, when friends in Ireland, when I tell them I work in conflict resolution, they always go, you! But as I think I said to you before our call, or before our conversation, I said to you on our call, is that this is, in some ways, this place is a dream come true for conflict resolution, because it's all swept under the carpet. And everything is... There's a great line, one of the guys from Pink Floyd said, and Pink Floyd is like the textbook of a dysfunctional band. But one of them, I think it was Richard Wright, said, things got so bad in the band. Things got so bad that one of us nearly said something. And, I remember one of my first pieces of work. So I started the business in 2010. And it took off. It took off around 2013, 2014. I started to make good money from it. And I remember I had a piece of work not far from here, actually, the Attorney General's office, the Ontario Attorney General's office. And I was brought in for a day to do a mediation. And one of the parties to the mediation sat in front of me and said, so this thing all goes back 10 years, right? It had been... You have to admire Canadians. That could simmer for 10 years before somebody actually said something. I'm kind of fascinated by what you do, because this is kind of an archive. This is an archive of people's memories, and there's something precious, because I've listened to a few. There's something precious in what you do.
I thought about that. I did not think about that when I first started it. It was started as something I do naturally. So I was like, if I'm going to do a podcast, I'd rather do something I already kind of do that makes sense and something that I'm curious about. And next thing, all these unintended consequences start happening, where you start meeting people that I may never have run into you, only for I had a chance to, it's very unusual to say, hey, do you want to go for a coffee? And I'm also going to ask you loads of questions personally about your life, unless you have this podcast as a reason to do so. And I was very fortunate that people at the start were willing to sit down with me and do that, and then create a little bit of an archive that more people were like, okay, I'll do it, even if they were strangers. But then, you end up with this kind of, you're right, an archive or a kind of legacy thing where in a couple of years' time, or in many years' time, people can look back and say, that was Daddy, or that was your granddad, or that was whoever it was speaking at that very particular point in his life about what he's talking about, and stuff that's very close to home. And I think over 80 people have been interviewed. I don't know when it's going to stop, to be honest. Maybe 100. That'd be a nice round number.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I think you're very good with story.
It's funny, in my personal life I'm not a good listener. I overshare, I talk a lot, I dominate conversations. But here I'm okay at taking the opposite role, which is interesting.
That is probably the most succinct description of my work style.
Oh, that's true actually, because you are well able to talk, but obviously if you're resolving conflicts,
you shut up. You shut up, and it's really interesting. I talked about getting sober in Ireland and then going to meetings in Dublin and meetings in London and meetings here, and there are three different kinds of meetings, because there's three different models of sobriety, because what you need to stay sober in each culture is different.
Yeah. AA meetings.
12-step meetings.
Yeah.
Well, generally 12-step meetings, not just AA, but there's. I found meetings in Canada to be very Boy Scout, very goody-goody, and there was an aversion to sharing negative things. And they say don't share negative because there could be a newcomer, and they would hear sobriety not working for you, and they might be dissuaded from coming to a meeting.
So voice, real life.
Yeah. Whereas, like, the devil has the best tunes. Like, you go to one of the things a friend of mine said to me about going back to Ireland is that you need to recalibrate for the negativity. You need to recalibrate because I think that we have a tolerance level for the fact that it's raining, for negativity, for that I don't think exists here in the same way. And it gives me no pleasure to say, I think Canada is the most heavily medicated Western country, maybe country in the world. There's a challenge with letting in the negative, and in my work there's the storytelling period where no matter what the situation and no matter what the person, what questions you might want to ask the person, there's certain stuff they want to tell you, and you need to shut up. And they'll start to speak, and then it'll come down like one of those hoses that's watering the garden. It'll come down and down and down, and then they'll become receptive to. But there's definitely a phase of you're just receptive and you're listening, and I've never lost the sense of privilege of someone opening up. There's a tremendous privilege.
Yeah, I feel that's it in this chair a lot, because it doesn't happen too often in real life, particularly with Irish males, Irish people in general, but definitely with men. I find it's very rare that someone will actually admit an issue or a problem or whatever it might be.
Why do you think that is?
I don't know. Like, obviously you've the whole generic thing that we're trying to keep our masculinity, and that's something which we kind of promote a sense of, amongst male, kind of a homogenous sense of that we're strong, masculine, don't share our feelings, stoic, all these are the things that we value in society, and it's rare enough. But I don't know if that's actually true, because a lot of the people that we have admired, that we put up at the pillars of the people that we celebrate to the rest of the world, our writers, for example, they're incredibly vulnerable, or were incredibly vulnerable people, and still are. Maybe just because I'm into writing. Our sports stars, I think we like a comeback story just as much as anyone. That we like people who are, stoic and achieve, but we also we love the underdog. So there has to be a sense of vulnerability in being an underdog. So I don't know. I haven't thought about it too much, but I have often thought myself as being, I'm different to all other Irish men, and then something happens at home or something happens just at work, and I'm like, I'm the exact fucking same. I don't want to talk. I want to fight through everything. I want to be stoic and all those types of things. So I know that I oscillate back and forth between thinking that Canada has developed me into this person who's willing to be vulnerable and willing to. An example would be admitting that you see a therapist. Not even admitting, just making that statement that you see a therapist. It takes a long time to say that out loud in a conversation with your Irish male friends. Just to say that sentence. I was talking to my therapist the other day, and yet I have students here who tell me in front of all these other strangers, other students in the class, in my first interaction with them, they'll mention something about their therapist, as if they were talking to their brother or sister.
And what do you think of that?
At the start, I was mortified. Sure, why would you admit that you have problems or see someone professional? Now, not so much. I am still a bit surprised at why you would feel the need to tell an entire room of people stuff that's that personal, but there's reasons to that as well. But I'm okay admitting it myself now, yeah.
So I think we're getting into something really interesting. Now, not that we weren't. But you see, what I have found in Canada, and this I think is different from Ireland, and it's part of what I miss. I was walking down a street in Dublin a couple of years ago, and there were two guys talking, and if you didn't have the audio, you'd think they were fighting, because they were gesticulating and they were being demonstrative and there was hands going and all the rest of it, but it was intimate. Because if I show you how much I care about this situation, I'm opening myself to you. But if I open with, my therapist says, I'm giving you work to do. You now need to process, this person is telling me about their therapist. That's different. And what I find fascinating with Canada is how a lot of the aggression is choreographed. So there was a whole conversation when I first came here and then after 2010 about hockey fights in ice hockey, which are very, very choreographed.
Unbelievably choreographed.
You send on the fighter.
They all look the exact same.
They all look the exact same. They go on, they drop the gloves and they hit the guy, and it's a way of the game policing itself. And the refs stand around and watch it. It's like watching WWE.
I was just going to, and I love watching WWE.
Yeah, sure, it's tremendous, but we're all in on it. I mean, the whole thing about WWE is it's a great big wink.
Yeah.
Like, we're in on it, sure, it's great, you know. And with the hockey fights, this is choreographed, and it's almost like Orwell's 2 Minutes Hate. You know, Orwell in 1984 is this thing where everyone can go and spit bile at the screen and get their hatred out. And I think Orwell might have been saying something about football crowds at the time, you know. But that, you see, I find in the work I do, it is very unhelpful to talk about positive and negative emotion. We talk about that it's helpful for people to be in touch with their feelings. And when you're dealing with someone in conflict resolution, and you know, I had a big piece of work with the Canadian military 2023, 2024. And it was extraordinary watching these people show up vulnerably and some of the stuff they talk about and not really grasping the significance when they spoke of what they were talking about detonation bombs that were attached to people and holding people who were dying. And it was a piece of work that it really impacted me, and I needed to take a break from work for a while because it was so heavy. But the thing that I'm trying to say is that we talk about people being in touch with their feelings, and when someone is angry, they're in touch with their feelings. And when someone, one of the things that I have found is that we might be inclined to try to intervene. Oh, don't get angry.
Yeah.
Or we might even say to people, don't get upset. But we'd never say to someone, don't get happy. You know, we police anger. And I found, and I think this is the same in some degree. There's a different relationship to anger in Ireland than there is here. But I think that anger is the last unauthorized emotion. And so consequently there's no sense of the wisdom of anger. That anger, that so much social change comes from anger, comes from outrage. And that we're not always plugged into, like Spike Lee said, that anger is the intelligent reaction for any black man in America. And the thing I love about that sentence is that it puts anger and intelligence in the same sentence. And so there's a particular relationship to anger and aggression here that's different. There's a different emotional calibration. And when I was going to 12-step meetings here, honestly, I couldn't handle them. It was too goody-goody. Like, I'd nearly want to boo. Yeah. I'd be like, it was, oh, my life's going so great, and boo! Give us the dirt.
Yeah.
I remember being at a meeting in Dublin. And this guy shared, tremendous. It was, I never forget. He said, yeah, I was owed some money. I went round to the place to get the money. The fella didn't have the money. So I'm here now, and I just want to say, fuck him. Thank you. That was his share.
Yeah.
And I just thought, God, that's fantastic. I saw a line, this really captured it for me, was Roy Keane some years ago. And he was asked what would happen if he met Alex Ferguson in the street. And he said, I'd probably have a go at him.
The honesty.
I'd probably have a go at him. And the guy said, really? And he said, yeah, why not? And it's the why not that that is almost sacred to me. Like that, I hold on to why. Why wouldn't you? another one of the differences I find, because of, as a season ticket holder to the Blue Jays and to the football team here, and particularly after getting divorced, I was going to a lot of sports with my son because it was kind of choreographed, and but the standard of do you know what I'm going to say?
Oh, exactly.
The standard of comment from the crowd to the players here, not.
No. There's a great line in the Unbelievables, a comedy sketch group from the
of course.
90s in Ireland.
Oh, yeah.
Familiar with them, but one of the characters, Pat Hart, is playing his GA manager character, and he said the standard of name calling in this club is diabolical. Running up to a fella, calling him a sissy and running away. That's no good. You insult his mother, his
That's it. That's it.
And it's, if you're going to do it, do it.
You do it. Like, what's that line? Some of you lads are only coming down here to use the fucking showers. Right? But I find, like, there's a famous one, Dublin playing Meath. And now my younger brother, who is a sports obsessive, who makes me feel good because he is the sports obsessive I look at and that makes me feel, I'm grand. It's not a problem. I can handle this. But he was at a game where Dublin were playing Meath and somebody shouted up, "Come on, the taxpayers."
It's genius, like. Yeah.
It's genius.
Yeah.
That's genius. Or I think that Laois were playing Meath and Meath would face Dublin in the next round. And was it Laois or Wicklow? But somebody shouted in, "Come on, the Greater Dublin area." Right. And I think that, I have a daughter and a son, and my son is an athlete, and watching how sports evolves here is differently. His trajectory in sports, because there's always felt with parents to be a financial component. Yeah. Is he going to get a full ride in college? Is he like, and
there's an ulterior motive sometimes.
There's an ulterior motive, and I really want to. When anyone ever talks to me about going to Ireland, I'm going to visit Ireland, I'm going to go to Ireland, I always try to tell them to go and catch a GAA game.
I say the exact same thing, and not just because I love the sports inherently. I think it captures something about our society and our. I know there's people who will look at the GAA in Ireland and say, we're trying to reflect this very homogenous way of living the way Irish people are. And saying, yeah, we kind of are a little bit. And because it's lasted longer than the States. And it is a reflection of where society is at. And the reason I say that is because even in the sports that are professional in Ireland, the GAA rubs off from them. We still have a lot of amateur kind of ethos within those sports, that the ulterior motive isn't as obvious as it is the second you move over here. But anyway, sorry I cut you off.
No, not at all. I mean, I think we need to bury the lie that the GAA isn't professional, in the sense that once you have journalists whose full-time job it is to cover GAA, right, it's professional. Once you have administrators whose full-time job it is to administer the sport, it's professional. And there is something unique about it. And one of the things that I feel distinguishes Ireland from Canada is that there's certain conversations that Canada has had that Ireland is still having. Certain conversations that are off the table here. Homosexuality was decriminalised in Canada in 1969. It's decriminalised in Ireland in the 90s. However, if you dig deeper, changing the law in Ireland is what you do after the social change has happened, not in order to affect the social change. Changing the law in North America is what you do to affect social change. It's the law, right? However, there are certain things that I feel that Canada has come to terms with and is grown up on, and more grown up on, and it's definitely, I think the immigration conversation is an unhealthy one here, because if you're not fully in favour of the current policy, you're a racist, and I think that's a problem. I say that as an immigrant. I think we need to be able to tolerate. But the thing that, one of the things that I think they're behind the curve on is their relationship to gambling. And when you watch sports,
it's so nascent, I think.
You only allowed multi-bet bets, if you will. You're only allowed those in the last year or two. A double or a treble or whatever. And so when you watch televised sports here, and there's cutaways within the panel discussion, the panelists are talking about the odds on a game. Yeah. And this is going to sound a little. Well, my main point is that I think in Ireland we're ahead of the curve there. That there's, you can't advertise gambling this way, and you can't expose children to gambling ads in the same way. But there's something else, and it touches on the GAA that I think is really precious. It's that came across this research. There's a medical condition amongst young men, porn-induced impotency, right? And basically young men who have consumed so much pornography that they cannot, their bodies won't perform when they're actually in real intimate sexual situations, right? And, we haven't really, I think the feminists of the 1970s were onto something when they were talking about banning pornography or saying this is more harmful, that this is not, this our dignity is a collective accomplishment and this undermines it in some way. And whatever about that, I was at a basketball game. I was at the Raptors with my son a little while ago, and it was his birthday. We had nice seats, and there was people sitting around us, and all they were talking about was how what was going on the court was affecting their bet.
You're triggering something with me here as well.
Unable to experience and enjoy the intrinsic joyful next, right?
Well, yeah.
Because they are so preoccupied by how this, they cannot enjoy sports for its purity, and its non-utilitarian nature. So when I was finishing theology, 2003, 2004, a new area of theology was the theology of sport. And you might think, well, what on earth, the theology of sport? But the argument was, in the Judeo-Christian traditions, the idea was that creation was significant but unnecessary. God didn't have to create the world. God created the world, and because it's created, it's significant. It has significance because it's created. And there's a Canadian philosopher, Charles Taylor, who I think is a national treasure. And he says the fact that the early authors of Genesis, authors of Genesis, repeated the phrase, God saw that it was good. That means that by seeing it as good makes it good. It becomes good because it's created. So it's unnecessary, but it's significant. Sport, unnecessary, but now that we have it,
isn't it great?
totally significant.
Yeah.
Totally significant. And we rupture the dignity of it by monetizing it this way and it's a reduction. And so consequently, I will say to Canadians, and of course the GAA has many faults as any other organisation, right? So I'm not here to smack it down or to promote it, but other than to say that it is an example of a kind of a non-utilitarian good. It's important because it's there.
Yeah.
And you were talking about the underdog. I am psychologically incapable of turning on a sports game of any kind, whether I know there's code or not, and finding one team down a lot to another and not back the other team, the small team.
Yeah.
And the idea here of backing winners, like I meet people who are Yankees fans. I'm like, you might
Toronto.
Yeah.
I met Dodgers fans this year.
Yeah,
last year I should say.
You might as well cheer on Apple.
Yeah.
You might as well go to a casino and cheer on the house. Like, what are you doing?
I know.
It's supposed to be. I don't know if you remember this, but TG Cameron, maybe 20 years ago, they had this initiative, they had this thing where players who were not county level players were got together to work. Do you know what I'm talking about?
The Underdog TV show.
Yes.
My sister-in-law was on it.
Really?
Yeah.
And there was a cutaway, there was a promotion where and they were going to play Dublin.
Yeah, of course.
They were going to play Dublin. And the guy interviewing one of the players just said, what would happen, how would you feel if you won? And the camera just turned to him and he just said, the player just went, win. That was it. It had penetrated him. Yeah. The idea of win, and they did win. Yeah. Or Dublin gave away a lot of yellows and it affected their, I remember I reported afterwards, this was not just a challenge game, this was going to be an official game. Yeah. So there's something else on that, actually. But that sort of thing. I will tell Canadians, go and experience this because there is nothing to compare to it.
The gambling, so I'm very lucky. I never had a tendency towards it or any proclivity towards gambling. It doesn't interest me, and I do consider myself a pure enjoyer of sport. And I think I'm finding myself in the minority now. Like, I listened to a fairly popular hurling podcast back in Ireland, and like I love it because it keeps me up to date with everything. But it is starting to turn me off because the amount of content they're given to gambling, and it's almost obvious to me that they also are fools, that they don't understand that they're being played. So they think they're very knowledgeable because they're involved in horses. So they kind of the lingo of talking about gambling, it comes very easy to them. They'll talk about so they'll almost analyse matches through who's the favourite, who's not the favourite, and they'll say, well, how much they're the favourite by 6 points. Oh, that's not right. They should be favoured by more. Yeah, in your opinion, because you think they're going to win by more than 6 points. But they don't understand that they're being played. The reason the what's the word, like the house wins because they're trying to commit enough people to back both sides of both horses, basically. And it's kind of this like idea that we a lot of people still don't comprehend that, but think they're experts on gambling, think they've almost beaten the system. I still think it is a major issue in Ireland, but I think it is a little bit better regulated. But I do have a lot of friends who I don't know if they watch sport anymore unless they're interested in having some sort of interest in it financially. It's so when I moved to Canada in 2019, there was no gambling advertisements on television, and now I can't watch a hockey game because I struggle with the amount of it, and I struggle with the pundits talking about it, and I struggle with it's just incessant.
It's endless and it's aggressive and it's a reduction. So there's two things kind of come up when you're saying that. One is I worked in Ladbrokes I was a board marker in Ladbrokes in the early 90s. This was before they had the screens. The odds would come over the radio and you'd write them up. I don't know how many cigarettes I inhaled in this time. But from I think 91 to I think 94, I would work on Saturdays in Ladbrokes, high street betting office. Right. So people were coming in to gamble. Particularly, it was on a Saturday, right? People were coming in to gamble, sure. And it was an all-male environment, by the way. I remember one occasion on a betting office, this woman walking in with a bet, and she put the bet down on the counter, and she said, "Now, how much does he owe you?" She was making it very clear this was not her. And I did sociology as an undergraduate, and I did a study on, it was part of our, required, I did a thesis, a research study on the betting office. The betting office as a social hub. And the special betting office as a social hub for men. So what I will say is that this is at least a physical location where you go and you meet other people. The gambling that we're seeing now is me and the phone.
Yeah, it's not anymore, yeah.
It's, if you like, if I was trying to use a posh word, it's monological. It's not, there's no dialogue. It's just me and the object. So there's that side to it. But I remember this was quite instructive for me because my son plays a lot of the sports games, the video games. The baseball one called The Show, he plays the basketball one, but he plays FIFA or whatever it is. And we were at a baseball game once, and there was a player on first base, and he wasn't leading off to try to steal second. And he wasn't leading off at all. Sometimes they try to get a little jump before they can get there. And I said to my son, how come he's not leading off? And he said, because he's a 1.3% chance of stealing, Dad. Because their relationship to sports is highly numerate. Canadian sports, American sports, they count everything. They count everything. And baseball counts everything, but hockey counts everything. You get a point for an assist, you get a point for a goal. Somebody got a 10-point game recently, and this was amazing. So it's highly numerate. And, you never fatten a pig by weighing it. What you measure doesn't make it better. And what I find is that with Gaelic football, with soccer, with hurling, it's more narrative.
Yeah. And
so when you explain something numerically, it becomes easier to move into odds, statistics, and predictors.
North America is prime for gambling, and the sports here are prime for gambling.
Yes,
as well. Definitely, yeah, 100%. Because it feels easier to win.
Yes,
from the gambler's perspective, I think anyway. Because maybe I'm wrong there. Because the narrative of hurling, soccer, Gaelic football, those kind of sports can trick you into thinking, whereas the statistics should deter you from gambling on certain occasions, maybe. But you'll convince yourself of anything.
Yes.
Anyway.
Yeah. So I mean, we have a different relationship to gambling. I'm not in Ireland. I'm not sure it's healthy. But I remember this was the Gulf War. When did they drop the bombs? 1990, 1991, the first Gulf War. There was a betting office in Tipperary was taking bets on when the bombs would land. When were the Americans going to bomb Kuwait? Or Iraq, or what?
Yeah.
This would be considered bad taste. But there's another thing that shows up. I remember when my son was playing baseball, he was about 7 or 8 years old and he was pitching. And in baseball, the strongest batter goes first and all the way down. And he was pitching and he came to me and said, Dad, I just got 3 up, 3 down, which means 3 batters up, he got them out. And there was another parent beside me. And I said, yeah, but it was 7, 8, 9 in the order. It was the weakest players. Go ahead and get the first 3 out. Right? He kind of rolled his eyes and ran off. But I saw the Canadian parent beside me kind of look as if I had committed a war crime.
Yeah.
Good job, buddy.
Yeah.
No. He's not me buddy. I had to drive him here. He's not. Good job, buddy.
I know, yeah. That's the characteristic we admire, humility and resilience. I often think if McGregor's probably the only fella to speak with any sense of non-humility that we kind of admire briefly in Ireland. Like any other sports here we've had, whether it be, in the GAA, definitely unbelievably, unnecessarily humble at times. But even our international sports stars tend to be kind, keep to themselves, and no matter what sport it is, McGregor's the only one who broke that mold. So he's maybe the exception. But I often think if we spoke in the media the way North Americans speak, and sometimes it's just matter-of-factly about how good they are and their belief in how good they are, it isn't received. I don't think it would be received very well. So there's a reason people. There's a lot of people who follow NFL the last 20 years in Ireland, and they want to see that kind of brashness brought into the likes of GAA, for example. I think there's a reason it hasn't worked, is because it's just not in our. The majority of the population wouldn't accept it.
What do you attribute that to?
Again, I don't know. Is it I suppose there is a lot of willingness to be the same as each other person as well. So until one person does it kind of mightn't stand out necessarily. But it's learned behaviour. It's any time you get ahead of yourself, you're kind of put down, like you did to your son potentially.
Yeah. Absolutely, I did.
And it happens all the time, and it's not. It's we all yearn for admiration. So we do get admiration in Ireland. I think it just comes in different ways. So it may not come in the way that we're used to seeing it in an American sports movie where your dad finally picks you up and says, well, good job, buddy, or whatever it might be, or you are great, you are everything I expected you to be. It might come in a different way in Ireland. It could come from a simple, well done, or even an acknowledgement of the game, or an eavesdropping, or something like that. So, I don't know. I think we need to be, and it could be a colonial thing as well, but I can't blame everything on colonisation.
We can try.
And it
might be a different podcast.
It has to play a certain role, but you see it in every sport. So it's not just a GA thing. GA players tend to be quite humble. Part of that is they're poorly media trained as well, so they're going to come across a little bit downcast and in media training. I would say hockey over here, humility is definitely expected more so than the other sports. I don't know if that's because it's predominantly Canadian. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
In comparison to the other sports, but look, it depends.
Because the Canadians would see themselves as humble compared to the Americans and less brash.
Definitely.
And there's truth in that. What I consider the humility it's probably not the right word, but the humility that we associate with Irish sports people, I think is an preemptive anti-banter device. Because the banter level in Ireland is Olympian.
100%.
And so you couldn't be exposing yourself to banter, to that kind of, because you wouldn't be making yourself a target. And Canada's not a banter culture. It's seen as mean. And in Ireland, there's an intimacy in it. That I know I have a kind of an in with you. If I can tease you, they say if you can tell a joke in a foreign language, you've become fluent. If I can tease you, we're close.
Yeah.
It's acceptable teasing. And I sometimes have been in the situation where I would be with another Irish person in a social situation. We'd start to banter a little, and you'd watch the Canadians watching it, and they kind of want to join in. But it's like as I think I said to you, it's like they're trying to merge with speeding traffic. They don't have the skills, you know.
Yeah.
It's just not in the culture. It's considered mean-spirited, and I think some of the humility that we see in Irish sports, I can't abide McGregor. I loved him early on, 2012, 13, 14, when he was just knocking shite out of people.
Yeah.
Talking shit about them and then beating them up.
Yeah.
That's tremendous.
Unbelievable, yeah.
And, you know, there's just a power to that and an impact to that. Like watching a 100-metre sprint, there was something. What I found saddened me was, like, if I got into a taxi in Canada when I first came here and I said I was from Ireland, people might say, you too.
Not anymore.
No.
No.
But now it's Conor McGregor.
Yeah. Especially in the States, I find. More so than Canada.
Yeah.
But yeah, I agree. A lot of my students who come in and take classes, if they've any interest in sport, McGregor is the connection. Not, McElroy or Brian O'Driscoll or whoever might have you. It's McGregor,
The other thing, just to wind up the sporting thing that occurs to me, is that Canada is kind of an overlap. That it has all of the North American sports. It even has its own football code. But it has all of the North American sports, but it still has the European awareness. It has a decent rugby team far better than the Canadian one, than the American one. It has an awareness of soccer because of the immigrant culture. You know, you go to Little Italy on a Saturday and you watch Serie A in Cafe Diplomatico or wherever. It's a bit of a sports watcher's paradise. But yeah, I do think that the humility thing is kind of it's like a rope-a-dope with the boxing, you know. If I say anything, if I put my head above the parapet, you know, but...
Yeah, an easy target. I agree.
Yeah.
I agree, I can see that. The drinking thing interests me because you said it was the year 2000, and I suppose it's all relative. Like when I got into thinking about not giving up drink, I felt like the whole world was also considering it at the same time. You know, it's the red car effect. You know, I kind of felt like I was reading Quitlish and everyone else was having the same thoughts and all this. So the idea of someone giving up in 2000 seems almost bizarre, you know, because there was no reason. There was no mental health problems in 2000. They only came about after we got phones and stuff.
That's right.
So
before that, there was just people who had trouble with their nerves who were tucked to the bed.
Were you one of those people?
No. Well, maybe. You know. So, you know, are you like the timing? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah. No, I'm just. It just sometimes when I just hear people in the past.
Yeah.
It's hard for me to process.
Yeah.
Because I feel like people are only giving up drink now, but obviously that's not true. Did
you hear how you posed the question?
Go on.
You said, when I think about not giving up drinking.
You're definitely not giving up this year now.
You didn't say when I think about giving up drinking. You said when I think about not giving up drinking.
That's just a double negative for the Irish.
Yeah, exactly. The problem with people who give up drink is that they think they're the only ones who ever did it. And they come out often with these. There's nothing things I can't stand more than celebrities talking about opening up about their battle. Feck off and close up, and there's a lot of crashing cliches. It gave me up. I'd gotten into a level of trouble that warranted legal intervention, and it had given me up. And I was, at 20 years old, I got a 5, which subsequently became a 6-year scholarship at Trinity. And I was set. I didn't have to earn my fees anymore. I got free rooms. I had free meal every day. And I was also set in the sense that I was an undergraduate student in theology and sociology, and I could major in theology then. Trinity College Dublin at the time, it still may be, but it was the only non-denominational faculty of theology in the world. And it was a unique experience, certainly, and this was a time when I think theology has taken a hit in terms of academic credibility, but in the 80s and 90s you had liberation theologies, political theologies, feminist theologies. It was exciting. And I came from quite a faithful background and or observant background, but I was fascinated by religious faith, and I was fascinated by the philosophy of it and the philosophical questions that went with it. So when I got this scholarship, I just went hell to leather. I was in the library. I would close the library, but I also used to close the pub. And so these went together. The crashing cliche of the heavy drinking intellectual type student. What I found around 96, 97, I remember people moving away, people moving on. There was a lot of money. I remember one day in Trinity, in Dublin, walking into Trinity. I was walking down Grafton Street and I found a €10 note on the ground. And then I was walking into Trinity 5 minutes later and I found a €20 note on the ground. Money was literally falling out of people's pockets. People were talking about buying apartments in Romania, and it was crazy. And I kind of resented and resisted all that, but I saw people moving on and making money, and I had a scholarship, and I kind of got into drinking more, and I went to the States. It was still okay when I came back from the States, 97, but by 98 I had isolated, heavily isolated. 98 was particularly bad. 99, and by May of 2000, I remember I was in Sweden and I was watching the FA Cup. Chelsea were in the FA Cup. I'm not a Chelsea fan, but I remember watching the game and thinking that I'm in trouble here. And I was also volatile when I drank. I was unpredictable, but no longer in a fun way. And years later, after I got sober, I heard of a study that was done by Johns Hopkins University with Alcoholics Anonymous in the 1960s. So AA was founded in the 30s. And I think it was a victim of its own success in a sense. It had become institutionalized. The courts were making people go to 90 meetings in 90 days. But Johns Hopkins University, or some large medical research institute, had approached Alcoholics Anonymous to see if they could do a major longitudinal study on alcoholics, to see if there was one core personality trait that they all shared, or if there was something. And they came back years later and they said that the only predominant trait that they could find that alcoholics shared was immaturity. Not creativity, not neurodiversity, not, we see more and we take on the burden of the world and we're poetic, and the beauty of the world just hits us with such transcendence. I remember in 97 I was in Washington DC. I was in the Irish Embassy on St. Patrick's Day, and I got an in. I met the head of the FBI.
Was President Clinton or Bush?
Clinton.
Yeah.
I went to his inauguration and I heckled him. But I remember meeting the head of the FBI, Louis Freeh, and I remember I was letting myself down. I remember the person who had gotten me into the embassy. I remember this person kind of look on their face that I joked about the Oklahoma City bombing or something. I didn't interact with the moment. I just saw the deadness in his eyes. But I got into the kind of trouble where I was arrested and I was in court 13 times over the same charge. This was 2001. And there's a judge out there, Judge O'Neill, and I've never met him, but he presided over the case, and he took jurisdiction of it. It could have gone to the district court, and he took it, or the circuit court. It could have gone to a higher court, and he took jurisdiction of it. It was violent when I drank, and he kept having me come back. So for 13 months, I kept coming back. Another hearing. I was in court 13, 14 times. And there was one day he didn't show up. And the judge said, well, I'm going to strike this off. I'm going to strike you. And I said, no, please don't. There's a deal here. I knew there was a deal, and the deal was I stay sober and I come back to court and he checks on me. I don't know that he knew he was even doing this, but that's what I felt was happening. And I quote unquote got off early 2001, in the middle of 2001, with a fine and I'd stayed sober for the year. I'd gone to meetings, and I became convinced that there was absolutely no constructive purpose to be served by me ever drinking. What would it add? What happens though is alcohol is not the problem. I hate to use the crashing cliche, an addictive personality, right? Like I'll jump into things. There was a phase when I read nothing but sports books for 2 years. I still love a sports book, but I read the history of baseball for 2 years. I dived right in, and it's not like I read a book. I was reading Bill James stats books, and the guy who developed sabermetrics for baseball, and I would go on kicks, and so the addiction transfers.
Yeah, I can relate 100%. Yeah.
And I think Sinead O'Connor said that sanity is just insanity put to good use. Now she's one to talk. Right? That sanity is just insanity put to good use. But I would say in workshops, I used to say this with the army guys, that there's no such thing as a positive or negative emotion. There's just healthy or unhealthy relationships to it. One of the things that I did in sobriety, because you realise the way you cut yourself off. But just before COVID, I started writing a mass. I wrote a requiem. Of course I did. I wrote a song cycle that it's a requiem mass, and it's a requiem really to a set of relationships I had, and my marriage is breaking up, but also looking back at Ireland, and it gets my attention that the thing that I wanted to write was a requiem. Was that I wanted to write a mass. We've got a Rothko here to my left, and I love Rothko, but one of his famous pieces is the Rothko Chapel in Texas, where he's got the Stations of the Cross. They're all Rothkos. And here was this New York Jewish artist being asked to do a Stations of the Cross, and he nailed it. That it was like an existing structure he tapped into. That with sobriety, you start to get into kind of sobriety projects. Like the stuff that you'd cut yourself off from. I found AA in Dublin to be absolutely tremendous. I'd love to write about it, but I'd love to write the characters.
Yeah, I can imagine actually.
Absolute characters. And I remember there's a code in AA, certainly in Ireland, and I love this about Ireland. And this goes to the Ireland-Canada thing very deeply, I think. There's a code, certainly in AA, but I think it's part of Irish culture, is that you do not give any attention to anyone who has celebrity. If there's a quote-unquote a celebrity, someone in the public eye who walks into the meeting, they're the same as everyone else. But I think we're good at that in Ireland.
100%. Yeah.
I remember going to see The Matrix. This will date me. I went to see The Matrix movie. And I was in line with a friend of mine, and she pointed out, we were in line, that in front of us in the line was Bono and his wife. Now I have a problematic relationship with Bono, right? A lot of Irish people do. There's a Darrow O'Brien's thing. Says, is Bono really Irish? Is he Irish the way Christy Moore is? But what got my attention was how he was left alone. And I think that's tremendous.
If he'd lined up for the same movie in New York or Los Angeles, he would have
yes. But I also have seen very famous people in meetings who talk about how much they like meetings in the US. Yeah, because you're a god in the US. Whereas you're left alone here. And when I lived in London for 4 years, and I used to go to a meeting in Chelsea, and where I was living, and there was this extremely, extremely well-known band who came in en masse. The four of them came in. An American band. They came in and sat down, and were left alone. And I respect that, but I did find that meetings in Dublin they were amazing, actually. But the other thing is, getting the first year or two of sobriety are kind of easy. you're getting into meetings and you're going for coffee with the lads and you're doing the steps and you're getting a sponsor and you're staying sober and you're doing stuff for the first time. And somebody made the observation, he said, do you ever notice that the first thing people do at the start of year 2 is they fix their teeth?
Interesting.
Yeah. They start to get into self-care. It's one of the things you see, year 2, people fix their teeth. Then they start talking about bills and paying bills and it's great, but then you hit this kind of lull.
Plateau. You see it with fitness a lot too, people who can get very motivated to train, but then they reach a plateau a lot. Yeah, sorry.
No, that's exactly it.
Yeah.
But what is the plateau? The plateau is life.
Yeah.
I think that what we have in Ireland, you have a copy of John McGahern's The Dark, which is one of my favourite books, sitting up there.
Yeah.
And I love McGahern, and I love his integrity. I love his fuck you. There's a line in one of his novels where there's a priest talking to a woman and he asks her why she's not more observant, and she says, I dislike institutions. That's her line. I dislike institutions, and that nails it for me. The quality to be bored. And you to bring it back to sports commentary, look at the terror that sports commentators in North America have with silence.
Oh my God, don't talk to me about.
Right?
Yeah.
Right?
Or just a general sports event. So I told my best friend that myself and my partner got engaged.
Yeah.
I decided to tell him at a Raptors game.
Yeah.
About the worst fucking.
Oh no. He didn't, did he?
No. As in, I was telling him.
Yeah.
I was just sharing the news that we got engaged yesterday.
Yeah.
But sure, we couldn't have a chat. Joe was like, "Oh, we got engaged," and next thing there's fucking music blaring.
Yes.
So I have to wait 30 seconds till the play starts.
Yes.
So the only time we got to actually chat is when actually the play is on. But even then, there's music on.
Yes.
And I have students who have told me their job is to go to the University of Toronto football games and play the music.
Jesus.
And I'm saying, you're the ones responsible. You're the reason I don't go to games anymore.
Yes.
And it's not because I'm turning into a grumpy old man. It's
well, it is.
Sport.
Yes, it is. But so there's something else. There's something else there that, if I remember going to a GAA game in Dublin with an American. Actually, an American I met at AA, and I brought him to a GAA game, and we sat down. GAA is 35 minutes, right? Yeah. It's intense. Yeah. He started talking to me.
Yeah.
I said, no. But you can talk at baseball. Baseball is more amiable. It's more pastoral. It's 4 hours, 3 hours, whatever. And you'll talk at GAA, but you won't. The game itself is too intense.
Yeah.
And what's happening is too. But I think that what happens in sobriety is you plateau, and then people think this is a problem. That actually, I think that the most biggest trait I can develop is the ability to deal with boredom. Having children is boring. It's fucking boring. It's brutal. I don't give a shit. You made what? That's great. It's boring. And I resented not being able to read because I was too tired. It's boring. And I admire people who can, parent, they'll have 5 or 6 kids. And Jesus. Being in a committed relationship is boring. Working a job is boring. Was it Voltaire or Rousseau? I think it was Voltaire Pascal said that most of the roots of human suffering come from the inability of a person to sit in their own company for 10 minutes. So sobriety kind of plateaus, and then people are like, well, what now? Well, this is now. It's not the Hollywood movies or the people going into treatment and then coming out. Yeah, see you in 5 years.
Yeah, things are normal and you just pay the bills.
Yeah, you're paying the bills.
Yeah.
You're doing what we're doing.
Yeah. Do you miss the crack of
going
on the tear and the unpredictability? There's always this thing with things like drinking and even people who have eating disorders to not actually share exactly. For example, people with eating disorders. I remember there was, I think it was Rosanna Purcell or someone was asked, what would she have eaten on the Late Late Show? What would she not have eaten? And she refused to answer the question because, there would be people listening who would compare and contrast. And I understand that.
Yeah, sure.
But there's not thousands of people listening to this. So
right.
I sometimes miss the unpredictable nature. I often say to my partner, it's on a Friday, I'd say, imagine imagine if I just didn't see you till Monday. So like, you know, nothing crazy, like, Joe, like that could easily happen when you're drinking, like, and like I'll be back on Monday.
Yeah.
But imagine if I just didn't see you till then, like, wouldn't that be mad? Like what used to happen, and look, that didn't happen too often, like. But the idea that like you'd rock on somewhere, and you know you might only have cash, so never mind having access to it. You have what you have, and you have the clothes on you, and the night could go anywhere, like. Whereas I know I'm going to be asleep in my bed at 9:30 tonight, like.
So, I miss the anarchic, the anarchic. I miss the volatility. I miss the madness. I've there's moments where I miss the madness, and I can also have moments where I will be around a social event, and I know it's about to lift.
Yeah.
I know it's about to move into that space, and I like a spacecraft trying to avoid the gravitational pull of a large object. I pull away. What I've learned is that was my way of accessing madness and the anarchic and unpredictability. But it was not creative, it was volatile. I couldn't guarantee my own safety, and I eventually wasn't able to guarantee the safety of other people, right? And I remember I remember once in what's the name of the place behind the forecourts? It'll come back to me in a minute. But there was but I was coming out of a bar, and I was involved in some kind of hijinks with some friends and whatever it was, and my face slammed onto the cobblestones, and I was pretty sure I was not going to lose my teeth. Like, I hit so hard with my mouth open, and as I hit the ground, I said, "Mammy," right? I'd gone.
Freud is writing down
right back. I'd gone right back, like right back.
Yeah.
And it was this moment. Like, I don't think I've told the story to anybody. And my head hit the ground. I was convinced I'd lost my teeth, and I hadn't. I don't know how. But I also realised I was using it as a way. Like, I was in New Orleans in '97, and I pretty much tried to find a way to get murdered, and got into a very, very hairy situation. And so there's the madness, and then there's the darkness, right? And I mean, my favourite John McGarren novel is The Dark, right? What I found is that alcohol was a way of accessing it, but it was a kind of retrograde way of doing it. It was not. Well, the way I'd say it is that I've had to find other ways of doing of having the madness. You have to have the madness. You have to. Or that great line from Waiting for Godot, where one of the tramps says to the other, Vladimir says to Estragon, is, "This is enough for you." You actually have to be tuned into the madness. So for me, the madness last year was to fly from Toronto to Birmingham to go to the final Black Sabbath concert, and just to sit there all day with this incredible lineup, knowing I was going back to Toronto the next day. And the way I got a ticket to that was to join Aston Villa Football Club and get a VIP ticket. I did a workaround. And my resourcefulness would astonish me when I really want the thing. Or the madness could be just before COVID, going to Taiwan to watch baseball. Sitting at a baseball. There's 4 professional teams in Taiwan. They just play each other constantly. It's hell or heaven, I don't know.
It's like the Toronto Hurling Championship.
Yeah, exactly. Those feckers again. That you have to find people. I see people at 12-step meetings and they're glum. And there was a lecturer in theology I had. He was a bit of an icon, really. Gabriel Daly. He was an Augustinian monk. And he said, I was in Rwanda in 1995, and I was with Trokra. I got to be in Rwanda, which was
a year after the genocide.
Yeah, a year exactly so. And like and I realise now that it was not well facilitated in the sense that we were exposed to things without being able to unpack them afterwards, because I was left with stuff that I kind of carried. I saw, the massacre sites and so on. But I met a guy in an orphanage who had been taught by this guy Gabriel Daly, and he quoted him, and he said, "Some people have just enough religious faith to make themselves absolutely miserable. And some people have just enough recovery to make themselves glum." Recovery is a thing they use to punish themselves with. Well, I've had my fun. I've had my fucking fun, and now it's time to be serious. Whereas, in fact, you have a responsibility to access the madness another way. You have to.
Yeah, that's why most people don't get through joy generally, because they view it as a miserable experience.
That's right.
To get through.
That's right.
Yeah, to be persevered through.
Yeah. You have to find another way of enjoying the anarchic, and I suppose if I was to be cliched, the crack or whatever, the unpredictable, the unscripted, and whatever it is, and I like to say in workshops, when I work with people who won't, Canada is very risk averse and very conservative, and there's a good side to that. It didn't have the global financial crisis the way other places did, but it also doesn't produce cultural output the way the States does, or it doesn't. Who are its great novelists? Who are its great? No put down to Canadian writers. Probably is. Sorry. What I say in workshops, it's a very dangerous game playing it safe. It's a very dangerous game. You can't outrun your unconscious. It'll find you. And you see, I think that AA is full of people who think their problem's alcohol.
They're just immature.
Well, I think drinking was an elegant solution for a while.
It was an elegant solution.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure works.
It works. And what I think that, I'm far longer sober than I was drinking, but sober from alcohol, you then get into other kinds of obsessions, and you have to navigate those as well. The thing about, say, eating or sex is that the abstinence model doesn't work.
Yeah.
See, with alcohol you can just stop. You need to eat, and it's considered to be part of an enriching life to have a sexual life, right? So in a way, I've certainly seen people in 12-step meetings who are like, well, I nailed not drinking. I'm not drinking, but I can't get a handle on this other stuff over here. Yeah, because it's not as simple.
Yeah, drinking is unbelievable. Yeah, you're right. I found that too. It's unbelievably simplistic, and I probably had disordered eating in the past actually as an example, and it's way more complicated. And I actually take greater pride in being able to deal with that, because it's more of a day-to-day thing. Because I was never addicted to alcohol in the sense that I needed it every day, whereas obviously eating is something that comes up every couple of hours that you have to navigate. So I wouldn't talk to many people about that, but I am secretly prouder of any time that I've dealt with that. But you're never finished with that.
No.
And maybe some people are never finished with alcohol either, but it does seem to be very easier to say, that's done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that we will reap the whirlwind in Canada 20 years from now, dealing with gambling addiction.
Oh yeah.
But I do think, maybe because my background and my training and all the rest of it, but I do think it's that drinking alcohol, it's like trying to find the shortcut to divinity. It's like trying to find the shortcut to feeling connected with and at peace and at one and bigger than you are, or more open than you know how to be, and full of possibility. So I definitely think that's, I can understand why I drink. I can totally understand it now. And I feel a degree of a relief and appreciation. I stopped at 26. 52.
Yeah.
Imagine stopping at 46. Imagine the destruction and the, Jesus.
Really hope you enjoyed that chat with Donal. I would like to thank him for sitting down and discussing his life with me. I appreciate his utmost honesty and I look forward to further long discussions off air in the near future. Once again, all feedback is welcome. You can email me. My email address is in the description of the podcast, or you can find me on social media. It's always lovely getting messages from strangers and talking about the podcast and their stories of what brought them to Toronto. I would still encourage people to download the episodes and to share them with friends and family. Downloads are the easiest indicator for me to gauge how many people I'm reaching with these conversations, so I would really appreciate it. Thanks to Natalie Barbuzzi, who provided the logo for the podcast, and thanks to Shannon Heaton, who provided the music you are now listening to. You'll find all of her music on Spotify. There'll be another episode of Irish in Toronto in 2 weeks, and until then, slán go forward.